Hello and welcome to Letters Home, a story of a World War II B-17 pilot from Lowell, Michigan, in his own words. And he just so happens to be my grandpa. I'm your host, Annie Whitlock, and I'm joined by my co-hosts, my dad, Mitch McMahon, my aunt, Lori Summerfield, and Dale Croft from the Lowell Historical Museum.
In each episode of Letters Home, we're going to dive into letters written by my dad during his time in World War II that he sent to his parents, siblings, and friends back home in Lowell, Michigan. We'll be reading his own words and giving context to what was happening in the world and in Lowell at the time he wrote these.
In this episode, we read a lengthy letter where Bruce describes one of his missions in detail. We learned about a night out in Amarillo, and we pondered the subject of Glendon Swarthout's first novel, Willow Run.
Absolutely. Well, before we get into it, though, we have a few, I guess, not corrections, but additions to some of the things that we have now found more information on from a previous
Morsels
episode.
of knowledge.
Morsels of knowledge. So we'll start with, if you remember last episode, we talked about Frank doing some sort of race in 1893 because it was part of like the Ledger's 50th anniversary. Well, we couldn't figure out what he was racing. Dale did a little sleuthing on this.
Well, we talked about, it couldn't be bikes yet because bikes back then were called the penny farthings, which were the
Penny
big
farthings.
wheels.
That cracks me up.
The big wheel ones where you had to basically use a stepladder and jump on them and hope you could keep your balance and not fall down. But in 1880s, the penny farthings were no longer the hot item. In 1880s, the modern day bike began with the two wheels and the chain. And so we're thinking now that maybe they rode bikes
what Frank wrote,
in the Grand Rapids, because the article that I have that talks about it, it says, and we talked about it last time, it says that all of his Frank and his friends rode their wheels into Grand Rapids, but only Frank and, what was the other gentleman's name? Tom Murphy and Frank McMahon were the only ones that rode their bike back from Grand Rapids, if they were bikes. The rest of them took cars. So we're thinking it was the modern day, the beginning of the modern day bikes that we all rode with.
Probably testing out the new invention,
There you go.
So
the bike.
also, we in that last episode, we talked about glad rags. So I went, glad rags. Let's find out what that is. So glad rags is an idiom that refers to stylish or one's best clothes. For example, let's put on our glad rags and take on the town. Now, they also think the term might have come from in the 1880s, the popular Christmas carol, Deck the Halls, mentioned in the song Gay Apparel in the lyrics.
Yeah.
So glad rags may have come from the idea of gay apparel, but it cannot definitely be proven. So in short, basically, glad rags are your party clothes.
Wow.
Nice, okay.
La 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 la.
Which explains why he was saying put on your glad rags and go to Lena Lou. Get your party clothes on.
And then we also know that Frank was pretty athletic. Reading some of the old little clips out of the old ledgers from those times, I come across a couple. He loved the race. So in the Lowell Journal, September 20th, 1893, there was a little story that says, there have been several foot races the past week. Yesterday, George Barber and Frank McMahon run 100 yards. Frank won.
This is where Bruce gets his athleticism from. We didn't know about Frank being the athlete.
Also in the Lowell Ledger, on November 11th, 1893, there's a little story that says, a foot race. Last Saturday, quite a crowd gathered to witness a foot race between Frank McMahon and Seabury. The latter had a 5-foot start, but McMahon won easily and pocketed the $5 bet they had.
That's a lot of money back then.
So, obviously...
And people didn't have a lot to do. It came out to the foot race.
The apple doesn't fall far from the tree with Frank being very athletic and the story of Bruce jumping between electric poles that Lori talked about on the previous. I also want to give a shout out to David and Lisa Reed that own this old theater, which is the Strand Theater that all of us went to when we were kids. They were nice enough. We had a story earlier about Margaret Niles and the Wax and how they did a play in the Strand Theater when they were in high school, and they signed their names underneath the stage on a wall. So I called Dave and I said, can I come in and crawl underneath the stage? and see if
You're
any
a nut,
signatures
Dale.
are there.
Dale is going above and
You're really
beyond
crazy,
in
man.
this podcast research.
And what's, back in the old days when it was first opened, Vaudeville, there were a lot of signatures on the wall, but due to, Mother Nature and different things. But our luck had it. When I crawled underneath there, the signatures I found were Margaret Niles, Bill Doyle, Sr., 1935, and Herb Reynolds. So there were the three signatures that we actually talked about in that episode.
That's so funny.
That's kind of freaky. So,
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, if you ever get a chance, this old theater now is real nice. They have dance things there where you can learn different types of dancing.
Lessons, yeah.
So it's they're trying to rework it and fix things in there. So if you get a chance, support them a little bit.
Yeah,
This
sounds
old
great.
theater.
Yeah. Don't ask them to crawl under the stage, though. It's
Oh,
just
yeah.
for you.
It's cool. It's really
That's
cool
wild.
down there because it's all a bunch of little dressing rooms and stuff. Back in the prime, it was had to be pretty neat down there. But
Wow, that's really cool.
yeah.
Right. So we always find like more information sometimes after these podcasts end, either Dale's from his research or our listeners. So if you have a correction or an addition for us, if you know any more people that we mention on the podcast, comment, message us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. You can also comment on Spotify. We have the comments function enabled right underneath the episodes, and we'll read it in a future episode if you got something good.
Yay.
All right, so we are talking still in May 1943, and at this time, Bruce is now instructing in Dalhart, Texas, and he's just flying a lot of dry run missions with various people. So we're going to read two letters that start to go into detail describing what it's like to fly. So I thought this was kind of a cool description. The first is from May 20th, 1943, in his own words.
Thursday afternoon. Dear Mother and Dad, poor start to a letter, but I've got an hour until I'm due at the squadron, so I'll give you an idea of what takes place previous to a flight. I had dinner at 11, beefsteak, mashed potatoes, 2 vegetables plus a green salad, apple cobbler for dessert, and milk. At 1, I go to the squadron infirmary and I get a physical pre-flight check, ears, and I sign a statement that I've had no alcohol nor sulfa drugs and how many hours I've slept. All pilots must take this check before flight. Then I go get my equipment out of my locker. Heavy flying suit, oxygen mask, parachute, and gloves. And then I go to the briefing room where I get all the information pertinent to today's flight, weather, code signals for today, and type of mission. And then I take my flight book and I get my loading list, check each man's health and equipment, and file my flight plan. When I finish, I go out on the line and the co-pilot has the ship running and each man salutes and reports the condition of his station. For instance, the tail gunner will say, oxygen equipment, guns, and ammo checked, sir, etc. I then make my check of the cockpit and we are all set for takeoff. Incidentally, you can see it even requires a certain amount of red tape to even fly.
I mean, I'm surprised to hear all that goes into just getting ready to fly, even before you get in the plane. But I guess
they leave that part out of the movies.
they probably do. I guess when the pilot says we're just finishing up some paperwork and we'll be ready to go on my next plane ride, I'm like, oh yeah, I know what that is. Maybe not to this extent, but yeah. So he wrote another letter the following day, May 21st, and he goes into even more detail about what the missions look like. So Aunt Lori just read the pre-flight plan, and now we're going to read what happens when he's actually in the air. It's a long letter, but it's really full of interesting technical details. In his own words.
Friday. Dear Mother and Dad, I guess I've neglected to give you more about my work, as you say. I write that stuff mostly to burn. Well, it's because when I write you, my feelings are more with you and less with what I'm doing. Well, suppose I describe last night's mission, okay? After getting my papers cleared, I took off and made a circling climb around the field. In my earphones, I can hear the tail gunner telling the co-pilot that his station is okay. 500 rounds of ammo, 350 pounds of oxygen, guns are checked. I interrupt to ask if he has his full flying equipment on. Occasionally, a gunner will leave his heavy jacket off or his boots until we get upstairs. Then he has to get them on with his oxygen mask on. His mask may not fit properly. Cole, tail gunner, 19 years old, answers that he has his equipment on, and so I listen to as each man checks into the co-pilot. Tail gunner, waist gunners, radio, ball turret man, engineers, bombardier, and navigator. Then I sit back and enjoy the sunset. There's a light overcast at about 10,000 feet, and I go on instruments to climb through it. My last look at the ground shows a patchwork of fields and dried up riverbed, the Canadian River. At 15,000 feet, we break through and keep climbing up into the thin blue air. At 20,000 feet, booster pumps on. Superchargers set at 35 inches of mercury. Air flight instrument checked. Filters off. Set at 2,300 RPM. All oxygen stations okay. Intercoolers off. To all these things, the co-pilot answers check as he completes the setting. Altimeter reads 25,000, and we level off. Change mercury and RPM setting again. Synchronize the automatic pilot, and after getting the proper mag heading from the navigator, set our course. Now all that goes on is this periodic 10-minute check of each man to see that he's okay. This is always necessary when on oxygen, because if one man should be without his oxygen at this altitude for over 5 minutes or less, he'd be a goner. Correct 3 degrees, right, Mac? That's the navigator. My ETA, estimated time of arrival, is 22:51, 51 minutes after 10 o'clock. From now on, these are the only interruptions I have as I sit and smoke by moving my mask in order to get a puff. Up here, a cigarette goes out very easily because of the lack of oxygen. Burned cigarette lighter won't light, and we have to use matches. I glance at the free air temperature, and it says 20 degrees below zero. Darn cold night. As I sit and listen to the steady drone of 4 whirlwinds, my mind wanders to home. It's after midnight now, and that flash of lightning came from about 20 to 45 degrees. Must be the folks are having a spring storm tonight.
This is so fascinating. And he writes about this so well. It's like a novel, right? He's like describing, and just picture him like moving his mask and making a smoke.
I know. That's just, yeah.
Yeah, and the part about without oxygen, he has to check on them every 10 minutes to make sure they haven't passed out.
Yeah, we'll see why here in a
Yeah,
second.
absolutely. We're going to keep going with this same letter. This keeps going. And then he even writes out a little conversation in the rest of this letter, like a screenplay between the pilot, who's presumably him, and his bombardier. So in his own words.
10:30, and the overcast we are flying over is almost gone now. The weatherman in the squadron knows his stuff. Moon's up now, and it's full. Even makes it difficult to read my fluorescent lighted instrument panel. Bombardier to pilot. Target, is it at 2? See it? Roger, Bombardier. Our first one will be a dry run. No bombs dropped to make sure it's over the target. Bomb to pilot. Give me a level, Max, so I can set my sight. Roger. There's your level. Wings and nose level. Bombardier. Sight is set. Bombs are fused and bomb bay is open. Roger. We are now on target. Let's have it, George. Bombardier. Bombs away. Clear to turn. Pilot. You say 150 feet at 3 o'clock. Good bombing, George. Bombardier. Say, Mac, there's Sioux City, Iowa down there at 3 o'clock under our right wing. How about taking a look? Okay, George, we're going down. Well, we look over the town, then go back upstairs and head for home. When we were out of Amarillo about 30 minutes, the tail gunner became sick to his stomach and took off his mask in order to get rid of it. This would have been okay, except that he left it off too long and we had to give him clear oxygen. He spent the night in the squadron infirmary, and I went over in the afternoon. He's okay. They've grounded him for a couple of days, but he'll be back by next week. In my last letter, I said I'd only be writing short letters. I've had a little extra time this afternoon, so I made the letter a little longer. From now on, I'll try to write more because of what I'm doing. Keep yourself in good shape, because I might be coming home for a couple of days in July or August. You're always in my heart and prayers. Your loving son, J. Bruce.
Poor guy got sick in his plane. That's rough. And then, of course, he passes out because he doesn't
You
have
can't
his
be without
mask
oxygen.
And he gets pure oxygen.
Oh, that sounds
And then
awful.
he was down for a couple of days,
Yeah, that must have been bad. Can they just go to whatever city they want? And it sounds like they just said, oh, there's Sioux City, Iowa. Should we just go look around? And if they have time, they can just land and go check it out?
I think so.
That must be kind of cool. So that's what they did.
And when he refers to going upstairs,
I wondered that too.
Is that
up in
That's
up in the
30,000
sky,
feet.
right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I just wondered.
it wasn't-
No, I'm with you. It took
When
me
we
a minute
go
when I
up.
read it.
When we go up, and I kept thinking, okay, wait a minute. Okay, all right.
It's just slang for being in the sky when we go upstairs. I guess so.
Yeah.
upstairs.
Dad just being his artistic self. Yeah,
I guess so. All right.
And the letter being May 20th, I was like May 20th, 1943.
Wow.
So that was 20 years, whatever, prior to me being 40, 50, 60, 20 years.
17,
Yeah, born. So, all right.
It's time for our segment where we talk about what was going on in the world and in Lowell when Bruce wrote these letters. And we're going to focus on Lowell this episode. Right around this time, author Glendon Swarthout published his very first novel called Willow Run. Dale, what can you tell us about Glendon Swarthout? Who is this man?
He has quite a story. He was born in Pinckney, Michigan, April 8th, 1918. His family moved to Lowell in early childhood, and he graduated from Lowell High School in 1935. Where he was voted most likely to become famous.
Well, makes sense.
Wow.
Pretty, yeah.
Right on.
And the best dancer.
Oh.
His senior class motto was revenge in music. That doesn't make sense to me, but
Okay, revenge.
that was his motto.
Senior quotes don't often make a lot
Our
of
class
sense.
mottos didn't make a lot of sense either. but
Yeah.
He was a Michigan high school debate champion and took part in theater productions at the Strand Theater. He was obviously one of the crew that didn't possibly signed his name underneath the stage
Makes
because he
sense.
was with Bill Doyle and Herb Reynolds and all that when he graduated with. His writing skills were encouraged by two high school teachers, Lee Miller and Ann Roth, and Mr. Jeffries, owner of the Lowell Ledger. He provided inspiration for his writing as well as, get this, Marion McMahon and Evelyn Lutz's writing skills through the Lowell Ledger.
Wow.
He majored in English at the University of Michigan from 1935 through 1939. He also became more seriously involved in music, forming and singing lead for a four-piece band that played for Hops and for 3 consecutive summers at the Pantland Hotel in Grand Rapids and the largest hotel in Michigan outside of Detroit. The summer of his junior year, he got a job playing his accordion in the resort town of Charlevoix on Lake Michigan with the Jerry Schroeder and his Michigan State College Orchestra for $10 a week. Bruce, your dad, was a member of that band who played the saxophone. He married Kathleen Blair Vaughn in 1940 and had one son, Miles Hood, who later became active in the screen productions of some of his father's novels. After a year in the advertising business, Glendon decided the way to become a writer was to see the world as a journalist. He signed as a stringer. A stringer was a freelance journalist for 22 small newspapers and traveled with his bride on a small freighter to South America, sending home a weekly column of their adventures called Letters to Lowell. And you can see those.
Oh, yeah, I've seen those.
Those are in, that's his letters on his journey.
Okay.
While in Barbados, they heard Pearl Harbor had been bombed and tried immediately to get to the States. But they needed 5 roundabout months avoiding German U-boats to cruise the east coast to Manhattan. And I have an article from the Lowell Ledger on March 26, 1942. It said, Mr. and Mrs. Glenn Swarthout docked in Brooklyn last Saturday after a hectic 2 weeks voyage from the Caribbean and arrived in Lowell Monday night of this week. Their voyage home was made aboard an unarmed Dutch merchantman, which narrowly missed being torpedoed off the Atlantic coast. Wow. En route, their ship rescued 26 survivors from its own sister ship, who had been afloat in punctured lifeboats for 12 days.
Oh, he's had some adventures. Okay.
Wow.
It says watch for issues of the ledger, of their adventure in the ledger, and I did find some of those. So hopefully that'll be another one of my projects to get all those together and put them together. Anyway,
We need our own Glendon Swarthout podcast.
yeah,
There you go.
Yeah, there we
well,
go.
we could share
We
some.
absolutely
I'm sure there
could.
is one.
In the early years of World War II, he worked at Willow Run Bomber Factory making B-2, B-24 Liberators. In 1944, he was in the Army assigned to the U.S. 3rd Infantry Division of the 5th Army as a casualty replacement, fighting at Anzino before his writing skills secured a transfer to headquarters to write accounts of actions of soldiers nominated for the Medal of Honor. Many of the 3rd were awarded 39 medals in their campaign from North America through Italy to Bavaria. After his discharge, he returned to the University of Michigan, earned a master's degree in 1946, and associate professor of English at MSU from 1951 to 1959, earning his doctorate in 1955. Now, he wrote a letter home like Bruce did, and a lot of the soldiers. He wrote a wonderful letter. It's at the Lowell Ledger, October 12th, 1944. I'm just going to read a section of it. This little section is called Kisses and Tears. I guess I've been kissed by several hundred women in France so far, old and young, handsome and ugly. But don't be jealous. It's the French kiss on one cheek, then on the other. One old lady as old and as small as my grandmother ripped my shirt sleeve as I rode up in a Jeep, simply because she didn't want to let me go. When you stand among them, tears come in their eyes sometimes, as they tell you, we have waited so long for you to come. 5 years we have waited.
Yeah, to liberate.
That's just a
France,
little blurb of his, it's almost, it's a quarter of the front page.
Wow.
From income he acquired from his first 3 novels, Glendon moved to Arizona, taking a lecture of English position at Arizona State University in 1959 to 1962. He continued to live in Arizona until his death on September 23rd, 1992, of emphysema, because he was a heavy smoker. Glendon Swarthout had the widest literary range of any American author of his generation, writing 16 novels, which ranged from dramas to comedies to romances and mysteries, and another 6 novelettes for young adults with his wife, Catherine. Quite a few of them were also eventually made into interesting motion pictures, including the film hits They Come to Cordura, starring Gary Cooper in 1959, Where the Boys Are in 1960, and The Shootist, John Wayne's last movie,
Bruce Dern killed
Paramount, 1976.
Oh, okay.
And as less successful films, The 7th Cavalry in Columbia, 1956, and Bless and the Beasts and Children, Columbia, 1972. He was twice nominated for the Pulitzer Prize in Fiction by his publishers and won a number of other awards for his novels, including a couple of Spurs and a Wrangler, as well as the Western Writers Award for Life Achievement. In many of his writings, he would recall the experiences throughout his life to set the tone for his novels. Michigan and Lowell laid the foundations for his career, starting with Willow Run in 1943. His first published novel, written after putting in 9-hour days as a riveter on the famous B-24 bomber plant outside of Ann Arbor, Michigan, tells about blue-collar workers at this defense plant. They came to Cordura, 1958. He uses his experience with the Medal of Honor winners in World War II to create an Army major, himself Gilder of Cowardice, who was asked to recommend soldiers for the Congressional Medal of Honor during the Mexican border incursion of 1960. Where the Boys Are, 1960. Acquiring knowledge of campus life while attending MSU, Glendon created a story of student spring break in Florida to escape from supervision into a wild spring fling in the sun.
Wow. That's crazy that he wrote that. Yeah, the range. Yes, the range.
Welcome to Thieves in 1963, which set our town to a buzz. It was his naughty book, they say.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Based upon actual case of multiple underage rape, which took place in the 1950s in a small Michigan town, Lowell, Michigan.
Oh, gee.
Where he grew up. And I have, this article's in the Ledger too. I'm going to read the setting of his book. It says, the setting of Welcome to Thieves, latest novel of bestseller Glendon Swarthout, is a small town 40 miles northwest of Grand Rapids. In other words, nowhere.
Ouch.
Furthermore, the piece contains the following disclaimer. Except for people identified by their true names, the village, its people, and the events in which the purpose of this novel engaged them are fictional, and any correspondence between them and reality is wholly coincidental. The main street of Thieves, the author tells us, is unique in that its center block consisted of a bridge under which was dammed the River Button, so that the stores anchored on hidden piles seemed to rest like boats on water. Unique indeed. Of course, the River Button empties into the larger river just south of town. Thieves has welcome pillars at each end of Main Street, the west one demolished by a teenage hot rodder, and the left unrepaired for years. It also boasts a defunct cutter factory, a grain mill, Stormy's Garage, and Creel and Cartridge Club, on a small lake 4 miles north of town, and a blind editor. All this may be wholly coincidental, but men have hanged on for far slimmer coincidence.
Yes,
That's
the
the
grain
beginning,
mill, the
the
bridge.
So,
Sounds
there's
familiar.
there's a character called Speedy in the book, and that's based on Dad.
Yeah.
That was based on.
so there's another arc in the ledger that came out when the book was going to be put out to the public, and it says, Glendon Swarthout's new book, Welcome to Thieves, is due on the bookstand soon. And half the town hopes they can find themselves portrayed in the story, and the other half is afraid they will be.
That is a great line right there. Nice.
It was great.
That's awesome.
Welcome to Thieves, 1963. Loveland, 1968. His Depression days come to life with a story of the bank's closing, and a son of the cashier of a small town bank sets off with his accordion to find summer employment as a musician to locate love in Charlevoix.
Okay.
Oh.
The
okay.
Button Boat, 1969, written with his wife Catherine. Recall the Depression days with a story of two children living in squalor with their drunken stepfather, maintaining themselves through their cleverness in catching clams and the hope that they might someday attend school.
That's different.
Cadbury's Coffin, 1982, written with his wife Catherine, is a Victorian mystery set in 1899, upstate New York, in which they used the Peckham name, and the Cutter Factory operated in Lowell from his days that he lived with Howard Peckham at U of M.
Oh, okay.
But it's set in New York. It's set in New York. So those novels are the ones that bring back his childhood, growing up here in Michigan and Lowell, and how he incorporated
Yeah.
it. The other novels that he had written is The Ghost and Magic Saber in 1963, The Cadillac Cowboys, 1964, Eagle and the Iron Cross, 1966, Bless the Beast and the Children in 1970 is highly, highly recommended for reading. The Tin Lizzie Troop, that Paul Newman had the rights to, but they never ended up making a movie. 1972, Luck and Pluck.
Of Luck and Pluck.
1973.
I've read that one. That's about an ad agency.
Is
so
it?
obviously he used his time at
Okay.
the ad agency.
Oh,
too.
all
And it was
right.
more
Oh,
light, and it was
yeah.
more lighthearted.
Yeah.
It was more lighthearted.
The
than
Melodone,
Thieves.
1977. Skeletons, 1979. Old Colts, 1985. The Horseman, 1988.
Oh, yeah, I've read that one.
Pinch Me, I Must Be Dreaming, 1994. He returned to Lowell for his 50th class reunion and recalled the fond, warm memories he had of Lowell and three of his best friends, Earl and Bill Doyle and Herb Reynolds.
Wow.
So there we are. That's
Yeah.
Glendon. Quite a
Very
story.
famous Lowellian
Very, very famous.
that Grandpa knew.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because we know that Bruce and Swarthout knew each other because they played music together in Charlevoix, right?
Yep.
So that was the
Yep.
orchestra. So it makes sense that Bruce knows him. We're going to read a letter that Bruce wrote to Helen and Byrne on June 5th that mentions Glendon Swarthout, mentions Willow Run with a bit of a twist. And we'll figure this out. So the letter also starts with more description of flying a little bit, this time on how to jump out of a plane, which is wild. Okay, so in his own words.
Saturday night. Dear Byrne, Helen, and family, first I'll answer your questions, which I'm sure aren't military secrets. Bailing out is quite a procedure. There is a warning alarm that I sound from my panel, and then in 20 seconds, the ship can be emptied. I'm naturally the last to go out, and I can either go through the window, out the navigator escape hatch, or out the bomb bay. In ditching, landing on water, a different alarm is given. All men go to the radio room and wedge themselves together in order to prevent injury on impact. They then go out the skylight hatch of the radio room, and two well-equipped life rafts are automatically inflated for them. A 17 sinks in about 25 to 30 seconds, so you can't be wasting time. We have these drills frequently so that the crew is kept proficient in these emergency procedures. My love life is nothing until the armistice. So I guess maybe we won't worry about second best. But if there's a second, who in hell was first? As yet, I haven't found either, I don't think. Say, how's chances of getting a hold of Glenn S.'s Willow Run? Aside from reading a book written by someone I know, I'd like to see what treatment was given the Marg A subject. As you know, I never did have her figured out proper like. Seems like things will be pretty quiet around town in a few weeks. Hope it isn't too quiet by the time I get back. Remember, I'm expecting one bang-up time when I get that elusive leave. Of course, now, with just the immediate family, we ought to be able to have fun. Gotta end this now. Brother, JB.
Very different when he writes to Bern and Helen, right?
Yeah.
Than to his parents. I love it.
Yeah. His
There's no
love
all
life.
my love and prayers and your loving son. It's just brother JB.
Gotta end this, yeah.
But he's writing about his love life and, says, "Oh, I don't think I've got a first or second," and then immediately mentions Margaret Allen. And does this mean she's in the Willow Run novel?
I'm thinking that's what it means.
That must be,
Gotta
right?
do some more research.
Because she was working at Willow Run.
Yep.
Yep.
So that makes sense. And you said that Glendon Swarthout knew Margaret Allen
Yeah.
as well.
He lived upstairs from Mom in the same house. Now, maybe that was at Willow Run?
Maybe. I don't know. Maybe.
Oh,
Because I don't know. Of course, I never thought to ask, well, where was this, Mom? But,
Well, yeah.
But
I mean,
I
we
lo-
didn't know we'd be making a podcast about it that many years later, so we didn't think to ask.
Well, he'd like to read the book from somebody that he knows has written it, and he'd like to know, see what treatment was given. The Marg A subject. I think that's such a way to say it. It's so.
well, like
So he must
the
know.
Lowell citizens were worried if they were going to be if they were in
Yeah.
there or not, and I think that's what's going on here. But
He must know that she's in the book. Maybe because they are talking at this time,
Yeah.
writing
Yeah.
letters back and forth. So
What treatment was given? He'd like
So we
to know.
tried to get this book. I looked for it on Amazon. It's not in print. You looked at the library, Dad, to see if it was at the local library or any of the local libraries.
No, KDL doesn't have it, and it's been out of print for a long time, and it's actually worth between $400 and $600 if you can find a copy. And Dale said he knows where a couple of copies are.
yeah. We got. I know for sure one. I think we have two. We have basically all his books at the Lowell Historical Museum.
Oh my
There's a couple of them we don't have. The one on Custard, which I want to try to get. I'd like to read that one. But
Well, okay, so we have to see if the Lowell
So
Historical Museum will loan
Tuesday,
it to
go
us.
down and
Yeah.
go up there and tell them you'd like to borrow it. They'll be
Okay.
happy to.
Good, because we need to read this. We
Yeah.
need to know
Yeah.
if Marg Allen is in this. So it's also close to Memorial Day at this time, and I don't know if you remember, like one of our very first episodes of this podcast was Memorial Day 1942, and the ledger had listed all the men that were in the service. So now it's Memorial Day 1943, and they do something similar. They had ads from businesses the different businesses were honoring very specific servicemen. Must have been people that they knew or had been with the business. So, of course, Lowell Light and Power has one. And they have a little ad, and it mentions Bruce, of course, but also Charlie Hausman, who we know is in the service, Elmer Layer, who we've talked about before, joining the Army, and someone named Lawrence Bryant. So we obviously have mentioned Charlie and Elmer. Do you know Lawrence Bryant?
I don't.
Nope.
All right. Well,
I know the last name, but we'll see if it's a relation to anybody.
We'll see. We'll see if
Yeah.
his name pops up again. All right. Well, we're going to wrap up today with Bruce having a little fun. It's not all serious flying. This letter is from May 30th, 1943, in his own words.
Sunday night. Dear Mother and Dad, well, I got off post for a 24-hour pass Saturday noon and went to Amarillo. It's the only big town around here, and so my co-pilot and myself went up and stayed in the best hotel in town. Immediately upon arriving in Amarillo by train, we went to the hotel, rented a swell room, took a shower, went down to the barber shop. I had a haircut, shave, massage, and a facial. And when he finished with me, I owed him $2.30, but it was worth it. After getting our blouses and pinks freshly pressed by the hotel, we went downstairs to a beautiful place with polished oak timbered ceilings and even a miniature waterfall. We told the waiter that we wanted the best steaks in the whole Texas Panhandle, and he sure gave them to us. We stuffed ourselves and then listened to the orchestra and danced with quite a few stag girls who were there during the dinner hour. They sure go for flying officers around there. So we were about to leave when Freddie McMahon, the kid who shared an 8-man tent at Santa Ana, came in and we got acquainted again. He's a navigator on a B-25 and his ship is being used by the Amarillo base. He was escorting a very nice-looking girl, and what's more, she had a sister, another girlfriend, and a big 1942 Buick. I took his sister and we went out to a country club dance. Had the best time I've had in an awful long time, and I have a standing invitation to go back whenever I can get off again. We met the girl's father. He's a contractor working on government camps, and he was very nice to us, telling us that he had 2 cars and a dozen gravel trucks we could use any weekend we needed a car. Well, my eyes are winning this battle, so it's good night. I love you, Mother and Dad. God bless you and keep you from worrying about me. Your loving son, J. Bruce.
Sounds like a fun weekend.
Yeah.
Now, at the top of this letter, Bruce has written a little note that says, "This smudge is chocolate ice cream. I've got a pint that I'm dipping into but will never finish." And then he circled it, and there's a little arrow that's pointing to a brown smudge on the letter. I love when he points out where the food stains are on his letters. This cracks. He does this a lot. You can see this letter, of course, and all of the primary sources on the Lowell Historical Museum website, of course. And Dale will have those on our PDFs and probably in our YouTube. He also mentioned eating Lotta's molasses cookies in a different letter, so he's got sweets on the brain.
Yeah.
As usual, he's got chocolate ice cream, he's got molasses cookies going.
I come by it naturally. There we go.
Yep, I was going to say. That's it for us today, though. Join us next time when Bruce gets ready to go on that elusive leave home. We're getting closer, so he's making plans now. Thank you for listening to Letters Home. We hope you continue to listen as we go through Bruce's story. You can listen to Letters Home on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or the Lowell Historical Museum website and YouTube channel. New episodes drop every Thursday. The Lowell Historical Museum has digitized versions of Bruce's letters so you can read them in full, along with primary sources for most of the people, places, and events we've talked about here today, plus more. You can also follow the Lowell Historical Museum on Facebook and the Letters Home podcast on Instagram at Letters Home Lowell. Thank you to Roger McNaughton for our podcast music and to WRWW 92.3 FM for letting us record in their studio at Lowell High School every week. Tune in or stream WRWW at lowellradio.org. See you next time.